Lena Whitmore sat in a small cafe in the heart of Florence, Italy, her gaze fixed on the cup of cappuccino that had long since gone cold. The scent of fresh coffee and pastries filled the air, the soft hum of conversation blending with the distant sound of a street guitarist playing a slow, melancholy tune. Outside, the golden hues of sunset painted the cobblestone streets. Couples walked hand in hand, lost in their own world, a romantic scene, one she might have once dreamed of. But 3 years ago, she chose to walk away. Back then, Lena had been a rising interior designer with a promising career at a prestigious firm. She had worked alongside Adrian Hale, a renowned architect, a man whose sharp eyes and quiet confidence commanded attention. He was the kind of man who always seemed to be in control, or at least, that was what she had thought. For months, they had maintained a strictly professional relationship. But then, on the final night of their project in Paris, everything changed. A light drizzle kissed the ancient streets, the dim glow of the hotel bar casting warm shadows. Exhausted from hours of finalizing blueprints, they had raised their glasses in celebration. "Just one drink, Lena. We've earned it." Adrian's voice had been softer than usual, almost inviting. One drink turned into two, then the conversation shifted. Dreams, sacrifices, the lonely nights spent chasing success, and before she knew it, the lines between them blurred. The first kiss in the elevator, the desperate pull of hands, the soft click of a hotel room door shutting behind them. By morning, reality struck with painful clarity. This couldn't happen again. Before Adrian even woke, Lena was gone. By noon, her resignation was sent. Now, in Florence, her fingers instinctively brushed against her stomach, a habit she had never quite broken in the past 3 years. There was no panic anymore, no fear. Only one lingering thought. If she had told Adrian back then, would things have been different? 3 years ago, when Lena saw the pregnancy test turn positive, her entire world shattered. She had left Paris, walked away from her job, from Adrian, believing it was the right thing to do. But she had never expected that one night would leave such a lasting consequence. And what terrified her the most was that she wasn't carrying just one, but 3 tiny lives growing inside her. The doctor had looked at her with quiet concern as she sat frozen in her chair, fingers digging into the fabric of her skirt. "Do you have any family or friends who can support you?" Lena only shook her head. No family, no close friends in this country, and certainly no Adrian Hale. She remembered those first few months, the endless nausea, the sleepless nights filled with fears she couldn't voice to anyone. But slowly, she learned to adapt. She left Paris, settling in a small town in southern Italy where no one knew her, where she could start over. 3 years later, Lena had built a new life, one she had crafted with her own hands. She ran a small yet successful interior design studio, gaining a loyal clientele with her talent and creativity. But more importantly, she had Elias, Leo, and Ava, her 3 little miracles, the greatest things that had ever happened to her. Elias was bright, endlessly curious about the world. Leo was quieter, but when he smiled, it melted her heart. And Ava, her stubborn, sharp-eyed daughter, reminded Lena far too much of someone she had tried to forget, Adrian. Every day, as she looked at her children, she wondered if she had made the right decision. She had never told him. She had never given him the chance to know. But how could she? Adrian Hale was not a man who wanted a family. His life revolved around his career, about chasing greatness through the structures he built. Love, to him, had always been temporary. And if she had told him, would he have stayed? She had convinced herself that keeping the truth was for the best, for the children, but deep down she knew a part of her had been afraid that if Adrian knew, he would see them as a duty, a responsibility, instead of something precious. So she kept her secret, until that fateful day when the past came crashing back, bringing Adrian Hale with it. It all started with a phone call. Lena was reviewing the final sketches for an upcoming project when her phone rang. A professional voice spoke on the other end. "We're very impressed with your design style and would love to invite you to collaborate on a high-profile project in Rome." Rome, a major step forward for her small studio. No one would turn down such an opportunity. What she didn't expect was that this project would bring her face to face with the one man she had spent 3 years running from. On her first day in Rome, Lena stepped into the conference room of the renowned architectural firm leading the project. She took a deep breath, maintaining her composure as she walked in, clutching her portfolio tightly. But the moment her eyes landed on a familiar figure at the head of the table, time froze. Adrian Hale. He looked up, his stormy gray eyes locking on to hers. For a split second, she saw a flicker of shock in them, but it vanished almost instantly, replaced by that familiar, unreadable calm. Lena Whitmore. His voice was slow, deliberate, as if he were savoring the sound of her name. What a surprise! Lena tightened her grip on the documents in her hands, forcing herself to remain composed. I wasn't aware you were involved in this project. Is that so? His head tilted slightly, gaze never leaving hers. Because I had the impression you've been avoiding me for the past 3 years. Her heart pounded, but she refused to let it show. I've been focused on my work. The meeting continued with an underlying tension neither addressed. Lena kept her tone professional, but she could feel Adrian's eyes on her, unwavering, dissecting every reaction. As soon as the meeting ended, she gathered her materials quickly, eager to leave, but before she could step out, a firm hand caught her wrist. We need to talk. His voice was low, controlled, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath it. Lena pulled her hand away. There's nothing to talk about. You disappeared 3 years ago without a word. Adrian stepped closer, his gaze sharp and unrelenting. And now you suddenly show up, acting as if nothing happened? She swallowed hard. We were a mistake, Adrian. That's all. A mistake? A dangerous glint flashed in his eyes. Is that what you really think? Before she could answer, her phone rang. The number of the babysitter flashed across the screen. Elias has a high fever. Without another word, Lena turned and rushed out, leaving Adrian standing there with unanswered questions. But Adrian Hale was never a man who let things go. St. Maria Hospital, Rome. Lena rushed into the emergency ward, heart pounding. Where's Elias? The babysitter quickly pointed toward a private room. The doctor is examining him now. His fever was too high. Leo and Ava, her other 2 children, sat anxiously on the waiting room bench. Lena knelt before them, pulling them into a tight hug. It's going to be okay. Your brother will be fine. Standing a few meters away, Adrian watched, and his heart stopped. The boy, Leo, had the same stormy gray eyes as him. The girl, Ava, had her mother's determination, but her brow, her features, a flicker of suspicion ignited inside Adrian. Slowly he approached, crouching down to their level. Hey there. His voice was gentle, though his mind raced. What are your names? Ava, bold and unafraid, met his gaze. I'm Ava, this is Leo. Adrian smiled, though his pulse pounded in his ears. And who is that person in there? Do you know what's wrong with him? Leo shook his head. He's my brother Elias. He has a fever, but Mommy said the doctors will make him better. Mommy. The weight of that single word settled deep in Adrian's chest. He didn't need more confirmation. He already knew Lena had been hiding something. But he didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, when Lena became distracted speaking to the doctor, Adrian suddenly reached out, gently plucking a strand of Leo's hair. Then another from Ava. Then another. An hour later, as he walked out of the hospital, he held 2 DNA samples in his hand. And soon, he would have the truth. Adrian didn't return to his office after leaving the hospital. Instead, he drove straight to a top-tier private DNA testing facility in central Rome, handing over the 2 strands of hair he had taken from Leo and Ava. I need DNA results as soon as possible. The technician gave him a sympathetic look. Normally, results take 3 to 5 days, but with priority processing, we can have them within 24 hours. Do it. His voice was cold, unyielding. Stepping out of the lab, Adrian's mind raced. The suspicion had been gnawing at him since the moment he saw the children in the hospital. Now he only needed undeniable proof. And 24 hours later, That proof arrived. A DNA report landed in his inbox. 99.99% paternal match confirmed. Adrian's entire body went rigid. He had braced himself for this, yet the moment he saw those numbers, something inside him snapped. Rage, betrayal, but most of all, an overwhelming sense of loss. Lena had kept this from him. 3 years, 3 children. She had never given him the chance to know, never given him the right to choose. He wasn't about to let that slide. That evening, when Lena returned to her apartment, she froze at the sight of Adrian standing by her door. His expression was dark, his usual controlled demeanor nowhere to be found. "We need to talk." Lena swallowed hard. "There's nothing to talk about, Adrian. Those children are mine." He threw the DNA report onto the table. "And you kept them from me for 3 years." Lena's breath hitched. There was no denying it now. "Adrian, Why, Lena?" His voice was low, laced with raw hurt. "Why did you take away my right to be their father? Did you really think I wouldn't care?" Lena's throat tightened. "You never wanted a family, Adrian. You made that clear 3 years ago. Your career always came first. So you decided for me? You thought I didn't deserve to know?" Lena clenched her fists. "I thought I was protecting them. Protecting them from me?" Adrian let out a bitter laugh. "Lena, you were wrong. They aren't just yours, they are mine." She took a step back as he stepped closer, his voice steady but intense. "You can hate me all you want, but you don't get to erase me from my children's lives." Silence filled the room, heavy with unspoken wounds and shattered trust. But Adrian had made up his mind. He wasn't letting her walk away this time. The apartment was silent. Lena stood frozen, her heartbeat hammering in her chest as she faced Adrian. The DNA results sat on the table like a damning verdict. There was no escape now. "What are you going to do?" Her voice was quiet but firm. Adrian's gaze locked onto hers, his stormy gray eyes unreadable. "I'm going to do what any father should." Lena clenched her fists. "You can't just walk back into our lives after 3 years and expect to change everything." "I have every right." Adrian stepped closer. "And I won't let you disappear with them again." Lena turned away, battling the storm of emotions inside her. "They don't need you, Adrian." "Don't need me?" His voice dropped dangerously low. "Elias just landed in the hospital. Leo and Ava could have an emergency at any moment. Do you really think you can protect them all by yourself?" Lena shut her eyes. She had raised them alone for 3 years, every second of every day. But deep down, though she hated admitting it, she knew a father could give them things she never could. "You can't force me," she whispered. Adrian took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "I don't need to force you, Lena." His voice was low, steady, carrying the weight of an undeniable truth. "Because deep down, you know I'm right." Lena parted her lips, ready to argue, but before she could, a small voice interrupted from the doorway. "Mommy?" Lena spun around. Ava stood there, her big eyes flickering between her and Adrian. Adrian stilled. Ava blinked, then asked, "Who are you?" The words hit Adrian like a knife to the chest. They didn't know him. His own children had no idea who he was. And that was Lena's doing. But instead of lashing out, Adrian crouched down, lowering himself to Ava's eye level. His voice was calm, gentle, yet firm. "I'm Adrian," he paused. "I'm your dad." Ava tilted her head. "Dad?" Adrian nodded. And Lena felt her world crumble. Because for the first time in 3 years, she knew this was a secret she could no longer keep. Time seemed to stand still. Ava stood there, wide-eyed, staring at Adrian, the man she had never met before, yet the connection between them was undeniable. Adrian remained crouched, patient. "Dad?" Ava repeated, testing the word on her lips. Leo stepped out from the room, his stormy gray eyes an exact mirror of Adrian's, watching him intently. "Mom, is it true?" Lena swallowed hard, her heart constricting. She had thought she was protecting them by keeping the truth hidden. But now, looking into Ava's hopeful eyes, Leo's cautious gaze, and Adrian's unwavering expression, she realized she couldn't run anymore. Yes, her voice was barely above a whisper. Adrian is your father. The moment hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions. Ava was silent for a beat, then suddenly stepped closer, her tiny hands resting on Adrian's. So, do you know how to build puzzles? Adrian let out a low chuckle, a sound Lena had never heard before. He reached out, gently ruffling Ava's hair. I can learn. Leo stayed still, sizing Adrian up as if determining whether he could be trusted. Then, after a long pause, he nodded slightly. You're really tall. Adrian smiled. Does that mean you want to play basketball with me? Lena felt her throat tighten. This was what she had kept from them for 3 years. And now she knew she couldn't take it away from them any longer. She took a deep breath, locking eyes with Adrian. We need to talk. Adrian nodded. Yes, but this time, Lena, you don't get to decide alone. Lena knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new, something unexpected. A real family. Elias was discharged after 3 days of observation. Lena couldn't describe the relief she felt when the doctor confirmed that her son was finally okay. But what surprised her even more was that Adrian had stayed with them the entire time. He wasn't just watching from afar, he was there, truly present. He comforted Ava when she grew restless, played puzzles with Leo to keep him distracted, and sat beside Elias, reading to him until his fever broke. At first, the children were hesitant, but day by day, Adrian proved that he wasn't there out of obligation. He was there because he truly wanted to be their father. He took them to the park, taught Leo how to shoot a basketball, helped Ava build intricate castle models, and introduced Elias to books on architecture. Slowly, the drawings the children made on the walls of Lena's home began to include a new figure, a tall man with a warm smile. 6 months passed, and Adrian's bond with the children only deepened. But the biggest surprise of all was Lena. She was still afraid that Adrian might leave one day. But as she watched him care for their children, as she saw the way his eyes softened whenever he looked at them, her fear slowly began to fade. She didn't know exactly when she started trusting Adrian again. She only knew that every time he held Ava close after a nightmare or patiently guided Elias through a blueprint, she realized that Adrian had truly changed. One chilly autumn evening, Lena came home after a long day at work and immediately sensed something unusual. The apartment was dark, lit only by the flickering glow of candlelight. What's going on? She asked. Then 3 small figures stepped forward, each holding a sign with handwritten messages. Mommy, do you want a complete family? Do you want us to always be together? And finally, Elias, the eldest, held up the last sign. Mommy, will you marry Daddy? Lena turned around, her heart pounding as she saw Adrian kneeling behind her, a ring in his hand. Lena, his voice was deep and steady, filled with emotion. I let you go once, but this time I want to hold on to you, not just for the kids, but because I love you. Tears welled in Lena's eyes. She looked at their children, then back at Adrian, the man she once believed would never belong to a family. But now he was here, kneeling before her, ready to give up everything to keep her and their children. A laugh escaped her lips, mixing with her tears. Yes! They were married on a warm spring afternoon. Leo and Elias wore matching little suits, while Ava beamed in a white dress as the most beautiful flower girl. As Lena walked down the aisle, she saw Adrian standing there, his gaze filled with unwavering love. For the first time in years, she felt no fear. She knew that, at last, they had truly become a family. That evening, as the sun set over the garden, Adrian and Lena sat side by side, sipping tea, watching their children laugh and chase each other across the grass. He reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. We finally found our way home. Lena leaned into him, smiling softly. Because after everything, love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing to stay. It was about choosing to be a family.